Well, welcome everyone to the next Cyber Week event, and we're here to talk all things small business and cybersecurity. So, cybersecurity of Aussie businesses. Now, of course, most listeners and viewers would recognise that 97% of the Australian economy is comprised of small business. By global standards, these are tiny businesses. These are businesses that employ less than 20 people. And today we're going to be unpacking with our friends at Cynch Security, Deakin University and RMIT University what cybersecurity actually looks like for small business, and to unpack some of the misconceptions, misperceptions, and all things misunderstood when it comes to cybersecurity and small business in our economy. And of course, the Australian experience is a really significant microcosm of what's going on in other major economies around the world. So for you, if you're listening from overseas or watching from somewhere else in the world other than Australia, this conversation is just as relevant for you as it is for everyone else. Before we kick off, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, including cyberspace. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And we're joined today by Cynch Security's founders, Adam Selwood and Susie Jones. And of course, we've also got from RMIT University, Matt Warren, and Graham Pye from Deakin University. Welcome so much to all of you. And part of the reason why we're bringing you this event as part of Cyber Week is because AustCyber's Projects Fund, and together with RMIT and Cynch Security and Deakin University, have put together a project that's worth over $200 to really explore why cyber risk is different for small business in the Australian economy. And today you're going to be hearing data that's coming out of that project for the very first time. This is brand new information and data on what the picture looks like for cyber risk, and to be able to look at what Cynch's security platform in terms of cyber fitness for small business is doing to help small business explore these challenges that they face. So it's with great pleasure and pride that I welcome Adam Selwood to take us through all of this. But before we get to that, we're actually going to be running a live poll as part of this event. So if you're listening in, well, you actually need a digital device to be able to be part of this. So if you're participating online, what you're about to see are 3 questions as part of the poll, and I'm going to read them out to you so that the listeners can also have a sense of what you're missing out on. The first question is, what percentage of small businesses feel day-to-day responsibilities for cybersecurity and where it sits in terms of their IT service provider? Question 2, what percentage of small businesses have installed an update on their computer in the past month? And question 3, how much do you think small businesses are expecting to spend on cybersecurity in the coming year? Let's see how much our sentiments out in the audience match the real data. Over to you, Adam.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And a big thank you to the entire AustCyber team as well, because it's been a really exciting and rewarding opportunity to work with everyone involved. And really thanks for the opportunity to share what we're learning about small business and cyber fitness with everyone here today. It feels like about 50 years ago, August last year, when Professor Matt Warren and I first sort of hatched the crazy scheme to study this space. And it came about when we were comparing notes around what sort of existing research is out there really to help us to understand how small businesses are approaching cyber risk and cyber resilience more generally. Having focused in this segment for quite a while, we knew that really finding any data of any description was going to be challenging. In fact, it's often just challenging to get to an agreement on what the definition of a small business is, let alone understanding what they're doing about cybersecurity. Too often what we find is that small businesses get bundled in and kind of considered in the context of small and medium businesses, the old SMB term that gets thrown around quite a lot. And we've even seen in recent studies that some results proudly spruiking the fact that 60% of SMB respondents had over 20 staff dedicated to security, which is really hard to believe when most of the businesses that we work with and are familiar with have less than 5 in total. So it's often very challenging to find some good data when it comes to cybersecurity in small businesses. It's been a really interesting year for everyone, not least of all the small business community and ecosystem. And so we had a few challenges trying to get access to and ask small businesses to respond to yet another survey about what's going on in their world while they're trying to grapple and deal with the active threat of COVID. But we were really fortunate to have quite a good response rate, and really want to just take a moment before we dig into what we've learned to just sincerely thank every business that's just took 10 minutes out of their day and all the stuff and the craziness of this year to respond and share some of their insights with us, as well as the amazing institutions and organizations that helped us to reach those businesses in the first place. And it really was an industry-wide effort to try to get out to them. So before we kick on, I can see everyone sort of responding to the polls here, which is really great to see. And these will be, we'll come back to these questions as we go through the session. I could see here the first poll that everyone's kind of talking about, or that we've asked you to respond to, which is about, where does cybersecurity ownership sit, and is it with their IT support provider, or is it with themselves and the business owners themselves? And there's a bit of a sense here that most of the businesses out there see the day-to-day for cybersecurity sitting with their IT support provider, and that's certainly some of the more common expectations around this. But as you'll learn in some of this in this first section of the panel, it may not necessarily be the case. So Morgan, when you're ready, if you want to throw the first video, and then we'll introduce the panel. Thank you. Well, here we are. And I'll just quickly, while we go around, we've got an elaborate group of people here today who've participated in some fashion in the study. So before we get going into the questions and digging into some of the data and the insights that we've just seen, I might just ask everyone to introduce themselves and their involvement in the project. So maybe, Susie, you're off to my right. We'll go clockwise. So how about yourself first?
Sure. So Susie Jones, co-founder and CEO of Cynch Security with Adam. So my involvement was really around the coordination of the project, and obviously also bringing my risk management expertise to the whole initiative as well.
Thanks, Susie. Graham, you're next off the ranks.
Graham Pye from Deakin University Business School and the Deakin CSIRI research group as well. And we've been working in partnership with Cynch on this project. Principally, I've been the one that's run the survey online, collected all the data and all that sort of stuff, and basically made sure the project's running smoothly from my end.
Great job you've been doing too, Graham. Thank you. And Matt, lastly.
Hi, my name's Matt Warren, and I'm from the RMIT University Centre for Cybersecurity Research Innovation. And certainly my involvement, as Adam mentioned, was sort of coming up with the problem idea, then working with Deakin on the project, running with the focus groups, giving input, to the different stages of the project.
Thank you. So we might kick in. So we saw a little bit of information sort of flashed on the screen there. There's quite a lot that everyone was furiously, no doubt, noting down, but we thought we might dive into a few of those elements. And as Michelle said up front, just sort of challenge some of the preconceived ideas and assumptions that many of us have. So we might start, Graham, first with you. Can you just give us a bit of a sense of the types of businesses that have participated in this study? And when we're talking about small businesses and the sort of insights that we're gathered, like, what sort of businesses are we actually hearing from, or have we heard from?
Well, in total, we heard from 165 businesses from across Australia. The majority of the responses were from the actual owners of the business, or they were a director or a partner within the business. 73% of our respondents were that. 17% were managers, and 10% were employees as well. In terms of the Australian standards of industrial classifications of businesses, I know that's a long, convoluted way of saying businesses fall into various categories, but 18% of our respondents were from the professional, scientific and technical services area. We had 15% from information media and telecommunications. 10% came from education and training. Interestingly, there were about 10% of the businesses who declared that they were outside the industrial classifications. 7% were retail, 5% were construction, finance, health services, and so on. And we had 4% from arts, recreation services, also manufacturing, and 3% from agriculture, and 2% from accommodation and food services.
So fairly broad cross-section of the ecosystem for sure.
For sure, Adam. Most of our businesses that responded, I think it was, let me look at my notes here, 92% of our businesses were medium to smaller sized businesses, so they're employing less than 50 people.
Mm-hmm. Just certainly when we think of small business, that's what we're thinking about. So as I said, the definition is challenging at times. I know we included a few that were a bit over that, up to about 200, but certainly the vast majority, as you said, were 50 or less. Yep.
In terms of state by state in Australia, we 42 of our percents were from Victoria. I think they probably had plenty of time on their hands with COVID, I'd say, which would have helped. 30% were from New South Wales, 21% from Queensland, 7% were a combination of Tasmania, South Australia, West Australia, and the ACT, and nobody from the from the NT, Northern Territory, responded.
We'll have to get them next time.
Yeah, we'll get them in the next round. In terms of the profile of the business in terms of age, 31% of our respondents indicated they were startup businesses. Mm-hmm. And 37% of the respondents indicated that they were in the early stages of their business lives as well. So more than half, 58%, were less than 10 years old in terms of business age as well. So that sort of gives you a rough overview of the demographic that responded to the survey.
Excellent. And that was certainly the goal when we set out, was really to get a broad understanding, as broad a picture of the ecosystem as we can. So I might throw to you now, Matt. So participants in this study generally indicated to us that, or indicated that cybersecurity is generally important to them, and often they actually see that they are responsible for the day-to-day aspects of it themselves, which is quite a contrast to that poll question that we threw up, which was, the responsibility day-to-day sits with their external IT provider. So is this the sort of, was this an outcome that you were expecting, or any sort of insights that you can share about what that might tell us?
I think, as you said at the very beginning, Adam, one of the reasons for undertaking the survey was actually to get that snapshot about Australia. And I think what it does is reinforces what we suspected, was that actually organizations, try to look after their own cybersecurity. The reason why that's so important, because it means in terms of raising awareness about cybersecurity, the focus actually has to be on those organizations, because the issue is, as well as running the company, whatever the company is, they're also trying to deal with their IT issues, their cybersecurity issues. So it means, if there's a new threat like ransomware, for instance, it's something that they may not have an awareness of, not fully understanding what it is, or things like implementing multi-factor authentication, they may not realize, why they should do that, why it's important. So I think it's very important, from a government sort of perspective, whether Commonwealth or state, in terms of raising awareness about cybersecurity, it gives a direction of where, those awareness and information, should be aimed at.
Excellent. Which is really important. So fundamental, knowing there's a problem is the really important first step before we can actually tackle it and do that. I think it was always really rewarding to see, and certainly confirms a lot of what we sort of see at Cynch, is that the ownership for the risk is very much felt by the owner of the businesses themselves and whatnot. Maybe sort of dovetailing from that a little bit, Susie, at Cynch we talk about and had recognized very early on that the owners of a business do see and take responsibility for this themselves. We also talk about money and time being one of the key constraints, as well as access to expertise being the sort of key things that may limit a small business's ability to actually act on that risk once they've identified it. Do you feel that the sort of results that we've seen through the study so far have sort of supported that, or is there anything that you've noted in some of the information and data that we've seen so far?
Yes, absolutely. I was actually surprised at how strongly that confirmation came through. So there was a significant portion of the business owners who responded who said, in fact, it was 84% agreed with the statement that cybersecurity is a complex problem. And a significant majority of them also said that finding time to dedicate their business to thinking about the cybersecurity problem was going to be an issue over the next 12 months, despite the fact that so many plan on investing into the future. So time is definitely the biggest constraint. Certainly this year with COVID, it has been a massive constraint. As much as we might joke and say, well, we've all down in Melbourne have been stuck in our rooms, that doesn't mean that small businesses haven't been busy working on whatever it is that they can to keep their businesses going. So time continues to be a big constraint, and also access to expertise. So there was the package there showed that about 46% in total of small businesses either go to industry or to government sites for advice on cybersecurity. And what we know from many of those sites is that they're terrific places to go to understand what the threats are, but not necessarily to how to understand specifically for their business how to protect themselves and what controls to put in place and how to do it. And so that was something that really came through here, that it's the how that is missing when it comes to small businesses.
And maybe Graham, you might be able to shed a bit more light on that point that Susie's raising there, which is, where are small businesses, where do they appear to be getting their information about cybersecurity at the moment? There's certainly government plays an important role there, but the results of the study seem to indicate that there's a bit of a range of different places that people are going to learn about security.
Yeah, there are, Adam. But predominantly it is government-sponsored websites that most small businesses are going to. And Susie's right. The information there is a lot of information there. There's a lot of general information as well. But most of our respondees, at least 92% of them, thought that cybersecurity was something they need to be responsible for and have to do something about. I think there's searches through government websites. Look, I can give you some stats here if you like. Most businesses, 17% were accessing government websites. 16% were accessing either business or industry association sites as well for information. 16% were using IT support partners of some description, and 13% were using industry or small business events, perhaps like these, to start to ask the question about cybersecurity and what I've got to do about it. Which is terrific. Businesses are out there trying to do the right thing, but it comes back to Susie's point too, that they know they need something, but what is it that they need? So by and large, what I sort of think is the businesses are looking for cybersecurity solutions that are tailored more to their needs and their risk profile, if you get what I mean.
Definitely. Just a couple of questions from the audience here before we move on to the next section. So firstly, I can confirm that there was a question here raised of how many companies were in the data set. So yeah, we had responses from 165 odd companies as part of the study. It's a little bit less than what we were hoping to get, but considering the current climate, we were very happy to have gathered that much information. It was quite an extensive set of questions as well, which was really good to see a lot of detail coming through the study. One other one here is probably more for you, Graham. So Glenn's asked, is the Deakin report available at a data level so that we can examine the results for specific company categories or to postcodes? I know certainly we have an intention to share this, the results of this study quite broadly, and what we're talking about today is more just the initial findings from that. But maybe Graham, anything you can share on what the plans might be moving forward with the data that we've collected here?
Yes, what we're sort of, this is really basically the first cut of analysis through the data that we're sharing today. We're also working on breaking it down by businesses, states, postcodes, etc. as well, to see what we can actually find. We're trying to also look at a comparison between rural, regional, and urban located businesses as well, to see what findings we can drag out of it as well at that point. And then the intention is that I will be probably writing a report that will be available to anybody who wants a copy of that report. And of course, we'll be sharing that with Cynch and AustCyber as well.
Definitely. So there's a few other questions in the feedback. I will say we're going to touch on some of these elements down the track. So I haven't lost your comments and questions there. We'll try to get through as many as possible. If anything does pop up, then feel free to flag it there. But we might sort of move on at this stage to the next set of question, or the next area of conversation. Just before we go there, if we wouldn't mind showing the results of the second poll question, which was what percentage of small businesses have installed an update on their computer in the past month? So again, we can see here the results are skewing towards a bit of an assumption that most have not installed an update, so few have. And there's a bit of a spread down there, but certainly the majority, the audience at the moment, feels that most small businesses are likely not going out patching their systems and doing, as we all know, a lot of the hygiene stuff that we all hope that they're actually doing. So let's have a look now at Morgan, you wouldn't mind throwing up the next video, have a look at some of the data, and then again, we'll dig into some of the, what are small businesses actually doing about security now? Awesome. So I might start with Matt on this one. One of the things that popped up in that little set of data there we did a bit of a comparison between a similar study that was run last year by the ACSC with ATO, where they looked at and asked a series of questions around adoption of the Essential 8 security controls, which are really seen as kind of a good foundation for everyone to be aspiring to in the first instance. In the results that we found, we saw some strong correlation on a few of the controls in that list, but then there are a few discrepancies and a bit of difference between what we'd found versus what the ACSC had found in their study, in particular around application hardening, patching, application control. Any thoughts or any observations as to what you think might have resulted in that difference in the data?
I think when you compare surveys, you always have to reflect that the sample who undertook the survey were different. So in terms of our survey, the sample that we were looking at were, startups, small companies, micro organizations, whereas the Australian cybersecurity survey had a lot more, reflection of companies involved with government, involved in defence. And I think that raises an interesting issue is actually when you look at SMEs and different samples, there's different understandings. So in terms of some of those terms you were talking about for, a startup, for, a sort of a commercially based small business, they're going to have problems, understanding terms like application hardening, patching, whitelisting. So it actually raises a very interesting question around the cyber narrative and why that's important. So sometimes, especially, with organizations that work very much in that cyberspace, they use the terminology, on a day-to-day basis, and it's what they're used to. But when you start to talk to organizations that aren't in that cyber or IT space, those definitions are harder to understand. So there's a sort of a piece of work there actually around looking at that cyber narrative and how to translate those essential 8 into a, that all SMEs can understand if they have, a non-IT or a non-cyber background.
Definitely.
And that's important when you talk about, raising future awareness, for SMEs across the country.
And that was certainly the approach that we took with this study. Many of the ways that we framed the questions around those controls were written and articulated in a way that anyone could kind of comprehend and check for themselves. So I think that certainly contributed in a lot of senses around this too. A really important lesson. And one of the sort of questions earlier was, there's lots of information out there. Why isn't it being adopted? And so on and so forth. I think one of my observations was certainly that there is more adoption than what we were expecting to see. A lot of these controls are being adopted. However, it's not necessarily intuitive for many to, how do you implement? It's difficult to put application whitelisting or application control in a large organization. How to consider that and put that into a smaller organizations, it wouldn't even know where to start in many instances. Graham, one of the questions in there was, or one of the points we raised in there, and everyone wants to know how much a small business is actually spending on cybersecurity. We noted that in here, about 19% of the respondents to the study actually indicated that they'd spent nothing on cybersecurity in the last year. Was that sort of in line with what your expectation was, or was there anything surprising that came out of some of those figures that people were responding to there?
Look, I found it surprising that 1 in 5 hadn't spent anything in the last 12 months. It didn't really generate any understanding or reasoning as to why they hadn't spent anything. By the same token, businesses can be a little bit guarded about how much they spend on particular aspects of their businesses as well, and maybe are a little reserved about disclosing those sort of things. But most small businesses are in the business of staying in business as a first point, trying to continue on and not go out of business, so to speak. So, quite simply, they may not have the financial resources at all to contribute to this. They may not have the knowledge, as we've sort of been talking about, or understanding. Look, a small business owner might think, well, I'm a small business, it's only me running it. It's, nobody's going to target me, therefore why should I worry about it? But again, by and large, the other side of the coin here is that 80% of our respondents are doing something. So they're being proactive, at least spending money on something around cybersecurity, be that technology or awareness training. And that's one of the things that did come out. They recognise, again, that, as Susie said, that it's a complex problem, but they recognise they need some training and education for their staff in order to train them to be a little bit more cybersecurity savvy, if you like. So that, those terms that Matt was talking about that perhaps don't translate well to small business understanding can be better understood, and staff can be aware of phishing emails and malicious software links and the knock-on effect of ransomware and these sorts of things by clicking on these links, and understanding what a denial of service attack is, and so forth. So I think once that sort of level of understanding can be built up within a business, then it empowers the people within the business to be able to respond and report something out of the ordinary, which is usually the first indicator that something's gone a little awry in cybersecurity.
Definitely. And someone in the audience questions has rightly called out, we've broken our own cardinal rule, and we've begun talking about Essential 8 without actually defining or explaining what that is. So shame on us and apologies for that. But one of the Essential 8 is a set of 8 security controls that the Australian Cybersecurity Centre recommend all organisations of any size implementing into their business. You can Google them. I won't rattle them off too much because I'll probably miss at least a couple of them, but they do include things like implementing multi-factor authentication, putting application control in, limiting access to administrators. There's a whole series of things to have a look at in there, and really worthwhile exploring. Another question that's popped up in here is very much along, well, the Essential 8 is a good control and a good starting point for many businesses, but what else can small businesses actually do to protect themselves? Which is a beautiful segue into the sort of question that I was hoping to ask Susie this afternoon as well. So one thing that I know you have a bit of a passion for, Susie, is cyber insurance. And unfortunately, whilst cyber insurance is a passion of yours, it appears only about 10% of small businesses feel the same way. So 10% of businesses indicated that they have a standalone cyber insurance policy, with very much the bulk of small businesses indicating they had nothing. So why do you think that this is the case? So it's one of those things that's been around for a little while now. Do you feel, what are the reasons that small businesses might be not adopting it, or why it doesn't seem to be as well understood within the market?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few reasons, and I'll try and keep my answer a bit short because, as you know, I do love this area. I think one of the first reasons is a misconception out there that cyber insurers don't pay up. I regularly hear from people across the tech industry to say, well, there's no point buying cyber insurance because they don't pay. And from everything that I've seen in terms of the data, there's absolutely nothing to support that perception. And so unfortunately, that means that many people hear that it's not worth buying cyber insurance when in fact it could really save their business. As you know, Adam, we recommend it to vast majority of our members simply because, not because of the dollars attached and being able to reimburse their costs, but because of the access to experts that it can provide a small business that is facing an emergency situation. So if you have cyber insurance in place, and this is a standalone policy, not usually a policy extension to something else, then you have access to PR experts and lawyers and digital forensics experts and everybody that you need to help you appropriately respond to a cyber incident. And unfortunately, as long as that misconception is out there, then I think that's going to be getting in the way. The other thing that I have seen that is a bit of an issue is a lack of understanding within the insurance broking industry around what some of these cyber security protections and controls actually are. And the reason why that causes a barrier is because cyber insurers need a small business to answer a questionnaire, essentially a proposal form telling them exactly what security they have in place. Now, if a small business owner doesn't understand what's being asked of them and the broker doesn't also, then that means the conversation doesn't progress. So we really need the tech industry and the insurance industry to start talking to each other, to acknowledge the benefits of each other and to really start playing ball, because at the moment, small businesses are not getting the benefits of this control that could be really valuable for them.
So true. The other sort of point that came out of the data for me in this sort of space, and it's really, I mean, it was also recognised as part of the 2020 cybersecurity strategy that it's fundamental that small businesses are provided with some material support in the event of an incident occurring. And whilst cyber insurance is a great way of getting that support and access, there's obviously a massive need to be able to provide something more material to so many of our small businesses in Australia already. So 32% of respondents indicated that they don't have any response plan documented, so they haven't necessarily formalized or thought through what they would do in the event of an incident. And even those that did have them documented, 5% listed some sort of government entity. And so with plans to introduce and bolster cyber.gov.au's kind of ability to respond and provide a hotline to small businesses in the event of an incident, it doesn't seem to be translating at the moment into the plans or what a small business would actually do in the event of an incident. So is there any lessons or anything to take away from that, Susie?
Yes, I think, I think it comes down to a misconception that writing an incident response plan is hard and it takes a long time. And we know from the work that we do with small businesses that is not the case. Writing down the phone numbers of everybody you would call when the proverbial hits the fan is not a waste of time, and it's not going to take a lot of time, but it can really help you. If your computer's locked up and you don't have access to any of your systems or any of your phone numbers, that can put you in a pretty dire situation. So encouraging small business owners to think about proactively setting a plan in place and having things like the phone number for the hotline that the government has proposed that they will be setting up within the 2020 strategy, that will be really key. And it will be really key to the success of that hotline and those programs, as well as to the continuing success of the small businesses themselves.
Awesome. So there's a couple of questions kicking around here that might be just worth touching on briefly before we move on. So there's a bit of a push for Essential 8 still into SMEs. Just generally, does anyone have any thoughts as to why we may or may not want to push something like the Essential 8? Like, is it a good foundation?
I suppose that the Essential 8 is good from the perspective it's a baseline. It's a minimum level of security that people can work off. And without that baseline, that sort of minimum level, it's hard then to build onto that to develop organizations' sort of cybersecurity capabilities into the future. So from my perspective, that's really how I see the Essential 8 as being like an Australian cyber baseline. And it's now being used across a number of industry sectors from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly agree that it is really a really good baseline to start from. But I think, as we mentioned before, that the trick is how can a small business owner translate the general advice and the rules that are written in Essential 8, and how do they actually translate that into something that means something for their business and put the controls in place. That can be really, really tricky, particularly when such a large portion of small businesses, according to our survey results, don't actually use any external IT support either. So if it is just a business owner, if it's an accountant or a lawyer or something like that, that doesn't have a background in tech, how are they going to make the Essential 8 applicable into their business? It's a real struggle for them. And that's why we break it all down into plain languages within our bootcamp.
There's a really interesting observation in these in the questions as well. Someone's noted in here that the fire industry requires that businesses need to be certified every 6 months and go through some compliance and regulation around that type of thing. I mean, before we move into this sort of final section to talk about like what's next and where we might go, anyone have any thoughts on the role of compliance and regulation around that type of thing? Like Essential 8 being potentially one of those sort of baseline sets of controls that might be worthwhile exploring and discussing and ensuring is present?
I think in terms of regulation, we're sort of seeing with the current discussion around critical infrastructure that there's sort of a move towards a regulatory model, and I suppose it really depends where the SME sits in terms of the industry that they operate. So they may be in an industry sector that moves towards regulation. So I don't think regulation will impact all SMEs, but it will impact those in certain industrial sectors.
And certainly we're already seeing many small businesses being asked to align themselves to industry standards that are being released. There's been discussion at government level for mandatory compliance requirements for quite some time, but it hasn't really started to manifest until literally the last month, where we've seen it pop up, Adam. And I think that the trick to consider is always how realistic is it for a small business to be able to demonstrate effectively and efficiently that they're doing the right thing. And again, that's where some of the capability that we've built out as part of the other half of this AustCyber project fund it really helps to do that, because it can help them to actually track and map the actions that they're taking against some of these compliance requirements. You and I often spoke about, Adam, compliance as a side effect, because compliance is not security and security is not compliance. And it's really important to focus on the highest risk within a business. But at the same time, if they need a ticket to the game, if they need to be able to show that they're meeting minimum standards, then there needs to be a mechanism for a small business to actually be able to do that efficiently and cost effectively.
Very true. Okay, we might move on to the last sort of section now. Just before we go, we'll touch in and see, check in and see how the third poll question is going from responses. I will note this one seems far more aligned to what we've discovered in the study. So Morgan, if you wouldn't mind throwing up the third poll question there. So certainly you'll see in the little video package that we're about to show that small businesses do intend and appear to intend to spend more next year than they have in the last year, even in light of there being a pandemic around at the moment, which is really an interesting observation we felt came out from the study as well. So Morgan, if you want to throw the last video, and then we'll move into the final set of questions. Thanks for that. So Graham, a lot of existing support for small businesses tends to be quite general in nature. So we've spoken a little bit about government resources and other bits and pieces out there. Seems to be, from our observation, that most of the guidance and recommendations is broad and quite general. Doesn't necessarily take into consideration the characteristics of a business. So when you work in a large enterprise, you have a team of people who take the very specific characteristics of that organization into consideration when they're investing in cybersecurity. We don't seem to have the resources online to support that type of model right now with small businesses. Based on the results of the study at this stage, do you feel that general broad recommendation approach is sufficient, or is it the right approach for what we should be thinking about moving forward?
Look, it's a good starting point, Adam. But I think we can do a bit more in terms of and let me set the scene for you. What came out of the survey in terms of businesses were they generally fell broadly into two categories. There were those businesses that were proactive and doing something about cybersecurity because it's a changing environment. So they're doing something along the lines to try to keep their knowledge level up, make sure their business is secure. There were other businesses that sort of fell into a group that were really reactive. So they had something in place, that technology perhaps in place, but they weren't necessarily building upon that. And they seemed to be either at the point where they sort of thought, well, I've got something in place. I'm reasonably protected. I can wear it, if something goes wrong. So that was essentially the crux of really what I'm trying to get to here. Is there was really a lack of knowledge and understanding again about what was needed to tailor something specific to the business. I think if we can bring something along towards small businesses about doing a risk assessment for themselves, or tapping into organisations like Cynch Security that can help them do that risk assessment, then I think they'll have a better idea of what their actual cybersecurity posture is, or status is, if you like, and then be able to look more deeply into the all that information that's out there and pick the eyes out of what really works for them and what they need as well.
Yeah, it's certainly a passion of ours at Cynch, which is to translate and prioritize and make sense of the massive, complex landscape which is cyber. But it's a hard problem. It's probably the hardest problem that we look to deal with, definitely, as well as a few other problems that are popping up in the questions, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, it is. Look, it's not a one size fits all, Adam, and everybody's different, and we've got to try and come to a point where we can best cater for that in some way, shape, or form.
Definitely. One of the positive trends, I think, that came out of the study from my perspective, while a lot of the existing investment appears to have gone into more technical solutions over the last year, it seems as though looking forward to what businesses felt that they should be investing into, it was more evenly spread across not just technology, but also the people and the process aspects of cyber risk as well, which in the industry, we're all aware it's not just a technical issue. In fact, more often than not, it's actually a human challenge or a maturity challenge around processes. Felt to me like a really positive trend. Susie, what are your thoughts on that trend and how that might translate into what we could be doing moving forward to support that?
Yeah, I was really encouraged by the data that showed that there is an increasing focus on the human side and also an increasing focus of ways that a small business owner can help their own team. They recognise, there's the cliche saying that they recognise that people are their last line of defence, but I think they're also recognising that they can be the first line of defence as well. So I was really encouraged to see that there's a focus on training and awareness, but also one of the stats that we showed there on the video package was that one of the things that would help a small business to do more for cybersecurity in the future would be the ability to DIY. So it is not that small businesses aren't willing to learn. They certainly want to know more about this risk and they want to be able to help their team be more secure as well.
Very true. And that's 100% why we built what we've built under this project. So if there's any small businesses in the audience looking to DIY or looking to get stuck in and understand and navigate all of this, then please check out our website. That'll be my one and only spruik for the session for the moment. Matt, so there was an interesting spread in terms of the ease of access to cybersecurity expertise. It was almost a bell curve. I always question a very specific bell curve like that. The data looks suspicious to me. Do you feel like Australia has the right mix of skills at the moment to support small businesses in this front? Is it easy to access the right people? Can they actually get the help that they're after?
Well, it is something that we've often spoken about, Adam, is that, the SMEs in cyber historically have been overlooked. And I think, what we've seen this year with the 2020 National Cybersecurity Strategy is that whole of nation approach, including sort of SMEs, so that focus on new training courses, helpline, more SME expertise embedded in the Australian Cybersecurity Centre is going to be helpful into the future to raise that sort of maturity and understanding. But I think the issue is that those small businesses are at different places in their cybersecurity journey, and it means that they're going to need different advice from different sources depending where they are on their journey. And this is why the boot camp model that you've developed at Cynch Security is such a good model for people, for SMEs wanting to find that understanding about what cybersecurity is and how it relates to them, because in terms of their cyber journey, that's the support and the help that they need. Other organizations in their cyber journey will need different advice. So I think, as I said, the Australian cybersecurity strategy really does represent that whole of country approach. And what we're seeing now is that SMEs are getting the recognition that they need from a national perspective. And hopefully over time, we'll see, those different initiatives from government and also from industries, such as your activities help towards raising that awareness and maturity.
Awesome. And it's actually a good collection of questions at this stage from the audience around this exact space. So really, really promising to see quite a lot of questions in here about how can we actually, access the small business market? How can we go to the small business market? How can we offer our services into the small business market? There seems to be a big appetite for that in here. Maybe Susie, I'll ask you the question, knowing full well that we spend almost every waking minute of every day thinking about this. Any tips for anyone that wants to break into the small business market and help them?
Yeah, look, as you say, we spend every waking moment thinking about this. The thing is, small businesses are fantastic at accessing and reaching out for support from experts when they know that they have a problem. And so if you do have a solution or you want to be able to help small businesses, then partner up with people that are already helping small businesses. So we're in discussions with industry associations, government departments, large corporates that have small businesses either in their supply chain or as customers as well. And we're partnering with those people as well as tech experts and insurance brokers, because they're the people that small businesses already know and trust and already have relationships with. And so partnering with people like that can really help you to break through that trust barrier, which cybersecurity solutions often run up against. But it can also mean that you can meet more small businesses faster. At the same time, we're also targeting small businesses directly, because there are so many small businesses now that, because of things like supplier assurance programs kicking off and new compliance requirements, and now having to figure out how on earth, as a 3-person company, do I respond to ISO 27001? And so that's why we're building out our programs the way that we are. So if you want to help small businesses, think about who they're already going to for expert advice.
Really good advice there. It's certainly important. And I mean, there's a question here about, are small business associations, chambers of commerce and the like doing enough at the moment? And I think the answer to that is no, but I think it's also been acknowledged in the 2020 strategy. So there's certainly an intent to work more closely with those industry associations, but also with larger businesses in their ecosystem. I think the reality is we all need to be doing as much as possible to outreach and to support small businesses, and it's not something that any one organization or anyone can do. We all just need to kind of muck in and give as much support and help as we can. Running out of time, it's gone really quick and there's a lot to cover off. Before we wrap up, I might just whip around or go anti-clockwise this time and give everyone a chance just to share any final thoughts on the study and what's next. So where do we go from here? So maybe Matt, if we want to start with you.
Well, from my perspective, it's seeing how the national cybersecurity strategy rolls out over time, the impact it has on SMEs. We're now seeing state governments develop their own cybersecurity strategies that also include that SME focus. So I suppose it's seeing how it develops from a whole of country perspective in terms of raising capability and the maturity of Australian SMEs in that cyberspace.
Yeah, really important. How about you, Graham? What's next for you? What are we going to do off the back of this study?
I think there's probably more work involved in certainly developing perhaps the risk assessment side of things for small business, so that they can make their own risk assessments. Is sort of where I see some of this research going. It's certainly informing that in my mind, that business wants to do something. They haven't got the financial resources, particularly the small ones. So we need to set something up or give them a hand to figure out for themselves what they need and what they're happy with. Yeah, it's. I've seen plenty of small businesses go to these trade fairs and those sorts of things, and they simply get overwhelmed with the technology and the gobbledygook and the tech talk. They know they want to do something and they're happy to do something, but they just need to know what they need to do.
Definitely. And I think I've got about 30 seconds left for you, Susie, if you got any final thoughts.
No worries. I think it's all been said before, is that I challenge everybody to rethink. If you'd come into this session thinking that small businesses don't care about cybersecurity, you now know that 92% or thereabouts do care and do think that cybersecurity is important. And so think about how you can help. And if you don't think that your business has the capacity to help, then reach out to businesses like ours. We work with micro and small business owners every single day. It's our passion. It's why we get out of bed every day. So I think it's really important for all of us to come together and support small businesses who care. They just don't know what they don't know.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for participating in the panel and supporting through the study and everything else that's going on. Look, thank you everyone for coming along and listening. If there's any questions or any follow-up, we will be sharing more and more about this study. Cynch is doing a heck of a lot, as we've mentioned a few times. So please feel free to reach out. All of our details are out and about. You can probably find us pretty easily. And with that, I'll throw back to Michelle to close us out.
Thanks so much, Adam. What an amazing session. And we've had a really interesting set of engagements through social media throughout this session. And I think the really important thing for people to note is that absolutely, I'm here to say that I'm proud that AustCyber is supporting Cynch Security and this project with RMIT and Deakin University because frankly, sovereign capability within this space is needed. Australian business knows Australian business, and a small business that knows the tough times that Australian business are facing is what's needed in this space. Over the past 3 years, the constant reoccurring message from the broader economy through to AustCyber has been what is happening for small business and who is helping small businesses to understand cyber risk. Well, that is Cynch Security. So proudly we support them through the project fund and of course through their partnership to have real rigor in the data that they're using to understand cyber risk better. Their cyber bootcamp is now available online. I encourage all watchers to be able to get onto their website and engage with that platform. If you're a larger business, you have small business in your value chains and your supply chains. It's a great way for them to engage in how your business needs to understand cyber risk from the very small to the very large. And so to understand that 2.4 million registered businesses in this country, just under 2 million of those are small businesses. This is a very, very needed area of capability, and what better way to do it through a rigorous publicly funded project that can help us to illuminate what those challenges are and really tackle the complexity. As Graham said, it's not a one size fits all. Every business is different and context is king and queen in this game. So Adam and Susie, congratulations for your project. And of course, we continue to work with you as the project finishes off and with the good work of the teams from Matt and Graham as well. I also just want to note as we close out that all of the businesses and universities involved in this particular project, so Cynch, RMIT and Deakin University are all based in Melbourne. They have been running this project through COVID with the lockdowns that Melbourne has been facing. So kudos to all of you for continuing to focus on the prize for small business and making sure that they have an avenue to go through to be able to understand what their cyber risk is, as malicious actors really do take the playground approach to the current situation. I also wanted to just note that as we go to the next event, which is tomorrow, we will still have, of course, the exhibition space within AU Cyberscape, the digital capability area. And of course, Cynch actually has a booth. And so you can get into Cynch's booth and have a look at what they have to offer. And of course, on Wednesday, you'll be able to speak to Adam and Susie directly. And that is super exciting to be able to explore the data of this project in more detail and understand what their cyber bootcamp can do for you. And with that, of course, we close out. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us for this event, and come back tomorrow for the next set of events. We kick off with a look at the investor landscape, bright and early, and jump into the digital cyber city to be able to see what is available. And Cyberoo is hopping around. Make sure you find where she is. Thanks, everyone.